Hi, Mackenzie.
Hi, sorry, I can't hear you. Give me just 1 second. It's not connected yet.
Carolina, are you there?
Here, Mackenzie, can you hear me?
Hi. Is that pronunciation right, by the way?
Carlina, yes.
Carolina. Great.
Sorry, I'm just putting my baby in my husband's carrier. Hold on
Oh,
one
no,
second.
please. No problem. What a little
The joy of
cutie.
working at home.
Well,
It is
positives
a joy.
and yeah.
Hi, how are you?
Hi, I'm great. How are you doing?
Pleasure to meet you.
Yeah, good to meet you too. So pulling up everything we need here. And also I need to change my background because this one is doing funny things with what's behind me. Let me see. Okay, well, that's fine. Well, we're excited to finally have you join us today.
No, I was just searching my inbox to email Emma something, and I realized that we started speaking in May. So here we are, end of the year. Oh my gosh.
I know. Yeah. Sometimes it just happens that way though. I feel like you just go back and forth and then finally something clicks and it goes forwards. So yeah.
It's the way that the world goes these days.
Mm-hmm.
Are you in London or?
I'm actually located in Italy, but I should be headed to the UK soon.
Lovely. Where in Italy are you?
I'm in Rome along with Emma, actually.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah.
Fantastic. It was Rome these days. It must be beautiful with all the Christmas decorations and everything. And
yes, they love their Christmas decorations here. So yeah, there's a lot of very shiny, very bright lights. But it's nice.
Are you from the States though, or?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm actually from California. What about you?
I'm from New York, but both my parents are German. So most of my family lives in Germany, but I am in New York and currently in upstate New York. So.
Oh, nice. Where upstate?
Yeah. In Millerton, New York. It's right in the tri-state of Connecticut, Massachusetts, and New York. And we relocated here, as so many did during the pandemic. And then, as you just saw, we had a baby, and so we just kind of stayed. But it's been easy to navigate my work from here, which I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about today. But you know, the adjustment to fully remote was kind of seamless for me, and if anything, more efficient. So.
I know, right? I think a lot of people have been surprised pleasantly by that part.
Totally.
Yeah, so it looks like people are starting to join us. So we'll just give everyone a couple extra minutes. We can just continue to chat and then we'll get started just a few minutes after the hour.
Perfect. And so we'll go through these questions. Obviously, it'll be really conversational and easy. And then great that we have a Q&A. That's awesome.
Yes, always. Yeah, so just kind of depends on the audience. I think towards the end of the year, sometimes people get a little bit quieter. So, we'll see how chatty people are today, but I'm sure we'll have more than enough to talk about. And yeah, I'm always very interested, honestly, in hiring as a manager. So it's something that is a topic of, great importance on my end.
I hope I can provide some insight and some advice and yeah, oh God.
Definitely. Okay. Hi, Emma. Emma just said hello in the chat. Hi, everybody who's joined so far. Just going to give any stragglers a few minutes to pop in with us, and then we'll get started. So is it getting cold in upstate New York? Then it must be pretty cold at this point. Has it snowed?
We've had some snow already, which was unexpected and very welcomed. Kind of gets you in that Christmas holiday spirit. But the last couple of days have actually been really mild and quite warm, which is also kind of nice. But we'll see. We'll see what the next few weeks bring. So
Yeah. Yeah. I'm excited because I'm going to Edinburgh, which is where I'll move for the holidays. And they're supposed to have like a once in a lifetime kind of Christmas heat wave.
oh, oh boy.
So that's going to be, quite an experience.
Mhm. Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
It's-
because normally it's like raining and freezing, right? So yeah,
well,
I'm
sunshine is
I'm
always welcome, right?
yeah, definitely. So hopefully I'll get in like a couple of nice, very green walks before the rain hits back a week later. So
Yeah, yeah. Do you have
yeah.
family in Edinburgh or?
My partner is there.
Oh,
So
wonderful.
yeah. Okay, well, I think we're going to get started. So welcome everybody to our last ArtEvolve of 2021. I can't believe I'm saying that. This is the second year that we've been running this program now, and we're still going strong. You'll see us in 2022. So today's topic is going to be on post-pandemic hiring in the art world, which I think is probably something on a lot of our minds as things start to get rolling again. And we're kind of thinking and looking towards the future and potentially expanding our teams going into 2022. So today I have with us Carlina Moyler, who is the CEO of Art Frankly. Welcome, Carlina.
Hello, thank you, Mackenzie. I'm excited to be here.
Thanks for joining us. So will you tell us a bit more about yourself, Carlina, and your background?
Absolutely. So I've been working in the art world for almost 2 decades. I've had a very nonlinear path. I started at Sotheby's, worked contemporary department, then worked at an art gallery in New York City, then actually had the opportunity to open my own gallery. That was at the time when the financial crisis happened, so 2008. And I had my own gallery and, did that for about 1 year. And that was the time when pop-ups became very popular. And after closing the gallery, I operated doing a lot of pop-ups both in New York and in Berlin, Germany, where my parents are from and where I have quite a large network and was working with a lot of artists there. So I was showing the artists that I worked with in New York, I was showing them in Berlin, and the artists from Berlin showing them in New York. And then I had the opportunity to work with the Cy Twombly Foundation in New York City. And it was in that position that the idea for Art Frankly came to me. And I was chatting with a couple of colleagues and we were discussing one individual and we had no idea what this individual did. Was he a collector? Was he an advisor? Was he a gallerist? And it just kind of naturally came up in conversation that, oh, wouldn't it be so useful if there was a database for the art world? We all know LinkedIn and IMDb for film, but the arts kind of has been forgotten in that sense. And the idea festered in my head and we just I kept thinking about it like, oh, this would be so practical. And then I was speaking to a dear friend of mine who was graduating from business school and he was like, well, what are you, it was actually around this time 5 years ago over the holidays. And I was like, well, what are you doing when you graduate? And he was like, I ideally would like to start a tech startup. I just don't have an idea. And I was like, well, I have an idea. I just don't know how to do it. So those conversations led us to identifying the need for a global job posting board for the arts. And, here we are with Art Frankly. So Art Frankly is a platform to help people find jobs and opportunities in the art world.
That's amazing. So I'm just going to pop into the chat for anyone that would like to take a look. Here is the URL, just as we kind of talk about this. So this is the project that came into fruition that Carlina is speaking about. And so, yeah, that's really interesting. So I'm just curious on a personal level, how did you come up with the name Art Frankly? This is just my own question. But
Great question. I mean, we toyed around with a lot of different names. And then my partner at the time, he came up with this idea of, frankly, it's something that you check all the time. It's kind of a nickname for a newspaper, a very outdated nickname for a newspaper. And we were just like, Art Frankly, and it kind of stuck. And it was the only idea for a name that we kept going back to. When we first incorporated as a company, we actually incorporated as Art World Database, AWDB, which was to mimic IMDb in its practicality purposes. And you can't say AWDB. It's like a big mouthful. It never worked. So Art Frankly, we realized that it would allow us a lot of opportunities to kind of do different things under the umbrella of the company. So
yeah, so that's great. I really like that. I like it as a name, and I think it's nice that it's sort of serious but also has that play to it, you know. It's good tech company name. So so yeah, tell us a little bit more, just so that everyone has the context of kind of why we're talking about hiring today, how Art Frankly works.
So Art Frankly is, again, it's a platform to find jobs in the art world. It's really easy to get started. You just go to artfrankly.com, the link that you provided, and you sign up for a free profile. And you can make your profile as robust as you want it to be, put as much information about your previous and past work experiences, current work experience as you want to share. And then you have access to seeing all the jobs that have been posted. And, you know, we are a global platform, but I do live and work in New York and have for the last, 12 years. So that is our largest network, but we have many jobs being posted in California, in Miami, in Philadelphia, DC. We see a large network growing in Canada, slowly getting more jobs in London as well. So, it's a very bootstrapped effort on our parts to get as many jobs from around the world posted on the site. And it's, Mackenzie, I lost your audio.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say too that, it's entirely free for users to apply for a job. Anything that's posted, we don't create a wall there. We don't follow from our employers, who's posts there, who's applying for these jobs. The employer posts, then everyone has access, and we do as much as we can to help promote those jobs, whether that be on our social media or through our weekly newsletter. So we try not to inundate our users with emails, but we do send out one email per week that kind of highlights and showcases new jobs that have been posted.
Yeah. So what we're going to do now, I think, is just for those in the audience, why don't you give us an idea of if you're going to be hiring soon, right? Because I think a lot of us are thinking about it. So you can go ahead and vote in the poll. Are you or your organization looking to hire new staff members in the next 6 months? So, I think some are definitely looking, some are potentially looking, some would like to look, right? So I think there's a lot of different perspectives on that. So I'll give you all a minute to answer that, and then we'll move forward into talking about what hiring looks like in modern times, postmodern times almost.
Yeah, it's been a turbulent year for the hiring world, I can say that, but it's definitely one that I think looks more promising, especially now.
Yeah, I think your internet is just going a little bit in and out. Do you have any devices that are connected that you can disconnect, like your phone?
I do not, but hold on 1 second.
Yeah, because it was fine when you had just come on earlier. Let's see, anyone else have any feedback? Okay, let's see. All right, so it looks like most of you have said, yes, definitely hiring. It's likely or maybe. Okay, great. So that's good. You're in the right place for this conversation then. Oh, you're sideways.
Mackenzie.
Just press mute. Okay, there we go. I've muted your computer. Sorry, everyone. Give us just a moment. Okay, that looks great.
Be better.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's way better.
Okay. Sorry, everyone.
Awesome.
Of course, not leave us. No, we're, for the last year and a half.
No problem. So it looks like most of you are looking to hire, which is great. Also at ArtEvolve, this is a project we're working on right now. So it's something, on the top of my mind. So let's talk about this. What are some of kind of the typical or traditional ways that employers, tend to look for new team members?
So there are job posting boards that applies to the cities that the company is based in, and that's a very obvious way for those employers to go about posting that they are looking to hire. Of course, also now with social media, a lot of companies will advertise that they are hiring on their social media channels, which I think is a great way to get the word out there. But I think what's most important, if you want to be as inclusive as possible in finding the right candidate, is to really kind of think outside the box and to use other job posting platforms that exist elsewhere. That's something that I'm quite excited about that has happened in the last year and a half, that people are working remote. And so maybe the best candidate is not in the city that you are based in, but a lot of the work can be done on the computer. So in that regard, I think there has been an opening of a lot of ways that the companies are hiring. Of course, there's also websites. People, post their job opportunities on the website, but that's something that we even identified in the beginning when we were building Art Frankly. People don't even think to go to a company's website to look at job opportunities. They're very set in their way of, if I didn't see it on XYZ, then they must not be hiring. So it's art world. And I'm sure, many of you in this discussion have encountered this in some capacity, but the art world is set in its ways. It is reluctant to change, but I think that is actually changing now, especially with the advent of everything that we have experienced in the last 2 years and this kind of forced upon us adoption of doing things in new ways, which I actually think has been a silver lining and is very exciting moving forward.
Yeah, definitely. And I think we all, in the art world kind of encounter these things, right? Where it doesn't necessarily change as quickly as we would like or move in that direction. But yeah, for hiring, I find almost like you were saying that this happens to be a cross-industry issue where people are just kind of used to going to sites A, B, or C, and that's it. And there's nowhere else that you would go to look for jobs, So yeah, it's very interesting to me. I think especially when we're thinking about those employees who are looking for remote positions, there are like at least a dozen kind of top remote position websites out there that some people don't even know exist or even know to look at. And that's where a lot of the companies post the remote jobs. And so if it can be this disconnect between the right person looking in the right place and then the right organization posting in the right place for them to find it. Yeah.
Totally. The art world operated, whether for good or for worse, on word of mouth, since it's kind of of the term art world. And, that is something that we have tried to help improve, because we're not going to be an inclusive hiring process. It just isn't, right? Because you have to know the right people in order to get that information. But funny enough, the way that we are actually growing and expanding, whether it be from candidates using our site or clients posting on our site, is word of mouth. So it's quite funny how that, people has changed and helped us as well. But when a candidate finds a job through us, they'll probably share with their friends and their network, oh, I found a job on Art Frankly, you should go check it out. So it's interesting in that sense too. And I think when it comes to, job searching, hiring, it's a more delicate matter than a lot of people realize. And having the trust of the community is extremely important. So our growth has been very organic and very real. And I think that's also important when it comes to job searching, because you need that trust.
Yeah, definitely. So how else are you kind of trying to do things a little bit differently than the traditional methods?
So that's a great question. We, do allow this profile building functionality, which I had mentioned previously. Other job posting sites don't afford their users that. That was becoming a database to, search people, to, find people that you may need. When we built Art Frankly, LinkedIn was not as used as it is today. I mean, I recall when someone told me maybe 10 years ago, oh, you should create a LinkedIn profile. I was like, okay, great. Very curious, checked out the website. And when I was inputting my professional experience, the only tab that they had for arts was arts and crafts. They had no gallery, museum experience. And I was
like, gosh.
It's like, that's really cute. And I respect that, but that's not what I do. So I think LinkedIn missed capturing all of the creative professionals in the industry. And as a result, there was a need for it. And that's really what, my team and I had identified with Art Frankly. And we wanted to create something that was specific and dedicated to the visual arts, and for that matter. So again,
that's so interesting, because I've been wondering why sometimes I cannot find LinkedIn profiles for people that I'm working with. And so I've been working in technology for a while, and I have an arts degree, but I was more an academic kind of the side of the art world. And then I moved into software and technology. And then now I do both. So I never really have dived into LinkedIn, right, from the perspective of the art industry. And there are way fewer people that have profiles or updated profiles on there, I think, within our industry than I've seen in any other that I've been in.
100%.
So, yeah, that
they may not have a profile picture. It may be like a incomplete, job or past work experience. And it's like, that they have a very, very exciting career path, but they just haven't input it. And I think, for the arts, LinkedIn was too corporate in the beginning, too forgotten of our sector. And as a result, it missed the boat to capture a lot of those professionals.
LinkedIn's lost.
Yeah, 100%. But as mega as LinkedIn is, it does still have some of its downfalls too. But so in regards to your question about how do we defer, we really are like the only profile building website to help find jobs in the art dedicated to the art world, and we do as much as we can to promote to different communities. And again, that word of mouth really helps us.
Yeah, I bet. So yeah, you know what? It reminds me a little bit of AngelList for the startup world, right? So kind of with that profile building and then also the job side of things. But yeah, it's nice to have that kind of cohesive space for the art world, because it's definitely, was definitely lacking for Art Frankly. So let's talk a little bit about kind of the employment climate in the art world right now. From your experience, what does the art world look like right now in terms of employment opportunities?
So it's been a turbulent years. The 2020 was catastrophic and devastating. It was art companies just slashing their staffs left and right, which I was watching with, trepidation, but I knew that once we got to the other side of this, which actually happened quicker than I thought it would, we would see a hiring boom. And we are seeing that now, especially as new companies are springing up in the art world, those surrounding technology, and NFT, that dirty little word. There's just so many new things and new initiatives, which is so exciting. And the galleries and the institutions, well, the institutions I still worry about, especially in the US, but galleries and private companies have rebounded, and they are now seeing hiring for positions that didn't even exist before. There's a lot of emphasis on client development. Obviously, they also need staff that is technologically and digitally fluent, which I think is really exciting. If we all recall back in the spring of 2020, when ours came up overnight, whether or not that is a website or it suddenly the art world had to adopt technology that they were resistant to for so long. So now I see this kind of, I don't want to use the word boom, but it's definitely a surge of all these companies trying to staff themselves to appropriately be able to maneuver these new businesses. And I think that's really exciting.
Yeah, definitely. And then in terms of those, pre and post pandemic changes, I've also noticed in institutions and, commercial entities alike that there's also more of a focus on adding sustainability staff. I don't know if you've seen that come through as well.
Definitely sustainability. There's more DEI compliant. There's a lot of great things that are happening. And I think what forced this was obviously bad, but what's happening, the result is very good. So I think there's a lot more transparency happening within these institutions. And, that's even as obvious as salaries, like what are salaries in the art? That has been so cloudy for so long. And I think there's a lot more honest conversations happening around that. And that's really good again. So I'm positive, and I think it's going to kind of marry a lot of the different topics that have occurred in the last year and bring a little bit more cohesion moving forward.
Yeah. So when you're kind of talking about this increased transparency, I mean, when we've seen this in other spaces or in other parts of the art world or for other reasons, it tends to also be because of the change in the generations in terms of leadership in the institutions. So do you find that just kind of like as time goes on and sort of the Generation X and millennials rise into those managerial positions, that you see more of that transparency kind of coming through in hiring?
Definitely. I think, the art world again has been set for so long, but as new generations come, or younger people are promoted to more senior positions or to more influencing positions, that change is becoming not only required, but really wanted. And that's so.
Yeah, it's almost like a generational shift in terms of priority.
Totally.
Yeah.
And also just the magnitude of the art world, period, right? I mean, if anyone is, reading the headlines and reading the news about the market, I mean, it's bananas. So I think there's so much desire for more transparency on that side. So that obviously trickles into the makeup of the institutions and companies.
hmm hmm So what do you expect to happen in the next 12 months? I guess in 2022.
I I wish I had that crystal ball, but
Don't we all?
I, I'm positive about what's happening. And I think on the heels of all this good that we've just discussed, I think there's more good coming. There's more interesting programming. People are, really focused on beefing up um, what they can do to foster and nurture their, if it's a gallery, their program, their artists, like how do we get more eyes on it? And now that everyone is kind of glued to these screens, if you will, there's such an opportunity to do exciting things for the artists. And I see just more of a shift on all of the kind of positions that we just discussed, more tech, like how does this work? How can it foster and also contribute to the bottom line for these companies? And
Yeah.
how can you raise awareness for all the things that you're doing? I'm curious to see the health of art fairs moving forward. I know that a lot of people were just in Miami for Art Basel, and it was very successful. I think there was a huge desire for in-person events again, but then this morning I read that ArtEvolve is postponing its March edition. So I am curious to see how the either return or further postponement of art influences the industry, and I do think that's going to be indicative for a lot of things, just because it's so crucial to a lot of the galleries' bottom lines, right? They need those art fairs to sell, but without them, where is that shift? And I hope that there's some more exciting things. It has to be postponed. There's some more exciting things to how can, the art fair exist digitally.
Yeah, we've been seeing that a lot on our end too. Like, this is the first year where we've had multiple like inventory management systems for galleries reach out to integrate with us in order to get the condition reports into the system and also available to the end buyer. So that's something that has definitely, kind of come through, is making that online ecosystem more complete to be able to sustain kind of large scale sales efforts.
Yeah.
So very different from past, I think. But yeah, I think that's going to be, again, kind of a process that happens over time, right? That shift. Also because, I think people were very excited to get back in person this fall. So then the online stuff fell away a little bit, and then it kind of has started to come back again. So it'll be a bit of that dance, at least from our perspective, I think, for, a bit of time longer.
Yeah, I think so.
Before the balance is found.
That's okay. It can be it's a combination. Yeah. I worry sometimes that the art world is too focused on hot topics, and then it peters out as the issue gets resolved. But I think what has occurred in the last year and a half, it should stay. We should really embrace this technology. We should embrace new ways of doing things. And at the end of the day, that leads to transparency. And I think that is something that needs to stick. So I'm hopeful of that.
Yeah. It doesn't need to be an all or nothing scenario, right? We can do a combination of things for success. And it's less risky that way, right? As we saw at the beginning of the pandemic, when we had to drop all the in-person items and we didn't have any online kind of digital infrastructures in place. So, yeah. So, I think we've talked about this a little bit, but let's talk a little bit more about some of the challenges that organizations are facing looking to hire right now.
I think there's I had a client call me, so I do private recruiting as a result, quite frankly, as well, for select clients that do not feel comfortable advertising. And I had a client call me in April of last year being like, are you worried about not having, being able to find talent in New York City? And I was like, well, what do you mean? And he was like, everyone is going to leave the city. And I thought about that. And I was like, oh, that is too fatalistic. Like, no one's going to leave the city. Well, here we are. And the number.
You left the city?
I left. So many of my peers did. But that actually that happened. So there's I would say a shortage of qualified workers to do in-person things. A lot of younger people, a lot of older people left the cities. That actually, at first I was like, oh no, but I actually think it's an exciting thing too, because it decentralizes the hubs of the art world. So people have left London, they've left New York, they've, moved a little outside, or they're, doing a new initiative in a city that they probably wouldn't have done before. That goes back to this idea, and hopefully the health of remote work. A lot of it can be remote. But so that is the one thing that I do see it can be kind of problematic for clients. And I've seen that even in New York City already, finding junior staff, people that need to be in person there, whether to receive art, to install work, to greet visitors. There is a little bit of a shortage. So I've seen a lot of job postings for the same position from many different companies. But that's a problem that's facing not just the art world, that's facing many different industries. I mean, I think there's 11 million job vacancies in America right now, and there's a lack of. So, people are also nervous to go back to in person, which I can completely understand. It's still unclear where we are in this pandemic. Before things kind of return to what they were before. But I think people are getting crafty, and things are moving forward. Thankful for the vaccine. So that is promising as well.
Yeah, so in that case, I mean, if you have a job that a lot of different organizations are posting about the same type of position, I mean, what would you recommend to an organization to stand out in that circumstance? Is there something they can do with the posting itself, or something they should offer? Or, I mean, have you seen any way that they can stand out in those type of circumstances?
Again, to the point of, I think, employers should be embracing this inclusivity. Post the job everywhere that you can. You will get more candidates that way. If you just post on one, you will get fewer candidates. It's quite obvious, but sometimes you need to drum these things into the art world again. I also always stress to clients, if they know in 6 months that they're going to need a registrar, post the opportunity now. Do not wait until the is urgently needed. Do not wait until it's urgent that the position is filled. Give yourself a little bit of time, interview people. Also, the more time that you give for the position, the more you could train someone. And that's actually something that I'm really seeing right now, is that employees in the arts are more willing to do that, where, in the past, it may have been, oh, their CV is not up to par, they don't know how to do X, Y, and Z. Well, a lot of these skills can be learned and learned quite quickly. So I think that's a positive, where employers are providing more positive and stable workplace environments, where they can, nurture and kind of develop their staff skills, which is a great thing.
Yeah, definitely. So that's interesting. I think, kind of thinking about hiring a bit further in advance, planning a bit further in advance, that's definitely important. That's something that we have kind of started to institute more of in the last year or so is also doing like not only kind of quarterly planning, but also planning for the next year in detail, right? The year before. So that way, when you come up on things like that, you kind of know much further in advance if it's something that's going to be needed, rather than, you get to 2 months before a project and you're like, oh, we desperately need this person right now, you know? So yeah, it makes a big difference to not have that, like, stress.
I love
So Emma,
it's awful. Like try to avoid.
yeah, yeah. So Emma was wondering if you've seen salaries increasing at all for in-person work because of the shortage.
Yes, I have. And that is another great thing. I feel like I keep pointing out the great things, which is a good thing. So,
Yeah.
That is needed desperately, along the ideas of transparency and inclusivity. The salaries need to come up across the board in the art world. That's just so prohibitive. That is nasty and very serious barrier to that. And now that those salaries are increasing, we are seeing that a little bit more, and I think that's something we're going to see more of. I hope, I mentioned quickly in passing, institutions. That is something I still worry about. I don't know where they're getting the funding, both, publicly and privately, but with galleries and other companies operating in this arena, we are seeing increases, long overdue increases.
Interesting. Well, I think that's good, honestly, especially because if you think about, the cost of living in a hub like New York City or London. I mean, I know, I've had lots of friends who work in the art world who are even, my age, 30 or so, and still were in flat shares and things like that because they couldn't kind of go beyond that. And it affects your, your kind of ability to work, right? Because of your quality of life. So I'm glad that kind of employers are also starting to think about it from that perspective.
Absolutely. It's even, in the beginning when so many of the companies cut down on staff, I think it was a realization to the companies, okay, maybe we can have one person who's doing a little bit of all three of these jobs, but actually pay them adequately. So there's been an adjustment in the way that companies are also structuring themselves, which I think is good. Maybe you don't need 10 gallery assistants, but you need 4 really great ones. And then you can kind of combine those 10 salaries to provide what you should be paying those 4 people. Right. So again, that's something, it's still in the process of being good, but it is, I think it's happening, and I'm seeing that privately and also just with companies that I'm familiar with.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about finding the right candidate for a role. So we've kind of looked at how to get more candidates to apply for the position that you're searching for a team member for. But how can our organizations, not only ensure that they're attracting talent in general, but they're finding the right person for that role?
I think hiring managers have a very hard job. And I always, I laugh a little bit when a gallery doesn't have one or doesn't have one person who is in charge of the hiring, because you do need to dedicate time to due diligence. You need to interview the candidates that you. I think often, and I see this actually constantly, there are qualified candidates for positions that they've applied to where their CV does not read the way that it should. Again, many skills are transferable. And I think it's important to ask very pointed questions when you are interviewing those candidates, because someone may surprise. I also, and this kind of goes to all parts of our conversation today, Mackenzie, but there's a lot of cross cross happening, like people from other industries are floating into the art world, people from the art world are floating out of it. And that's exciting because that was something that we were always on the edge of, this, you know, either fashion or film, you know, cross promoting these different industries. And now I'm seeing it a lot. And I think it's actually because of technology, you know, into you and your career path, like how you floated into the arts. Again, that's happening more often than not. So my advice to employers who are looking for the right candidate is, again, just give yourself time, time to post the job, time to interview, a time for the hire, and don't necessarily turn a candidate away who doesn't at first seem like they check all the boxes. We all know that a piece of paper does not suffice when it comes to a good, it doesn't necessarily work when it comes to a good match, an employment match.
Definitely. Like, I mean, I've seen that. Sorry, go ahead.
It's like dating. Like you know, like you have to look at like an online profile without photos or without a conversation. You've got to start flirting and see if it's a good match.
Yeah, agreed. You know, I found that as something very interesting because I think so the kind of general advice, right, for candidates who are looking for a position is to apply to jobs where you meet about 80% of the criteria, right? Not necessarily 100%. And however, in the art world, we're still kind of a little bit behind, and we do look for candidates as a hiring manager who reach 100% of our request. And so I think there's, you know, kind of that disconnect there where that 20% might be in the details, like you said, of their background or experience that has come through in other ways that's not in their CV, or they can learn that 20%, right? But instead we kind of say, oh, 100%, or we're not going to give them an interview. So yeah, I think kind of having that flexibility is really important.
Absolutely. And it can be tough, especially if the hiring party does use CRM or something that is like one of these auto filters. So, you know, this technology or the software is scanning the CVs for kind of keywords from the job description. That can be tough. Luckily, the art world doesn't widely use those yet.
Right. So, yeah, I was about to say, how common is that really?
Not at all. I only know a few of my clients that, and it's probably the obvious ones to this audience, like who is, you know, big enough to need something like that. But my advice would be to those candidates applying for positions like that at bigger institutions: read the job description, alter or tweak your CV a little bit before sending, you know, like pull out those keywords, put them into your CV. I mean, obviously do not lie on your CV, but do tweak your CV to the hiring party. That's important. You know, if you're in that 20%, you need to get a couple of reasons of why, you know, the employer is going to call you and say, I want to I want to learn. That's a great, you know, that's actually when the cover letter does serve a purpose. You can explain that. Cover letters, otherwise, I think, I don't know. I don't see them being used as often as they used to be. But if you have that opportunity, then that's a great place where you can highlight some experiences or skill sets that you can't on the, you know, 8x11 piece of paper.
Yeah, or just a sneaky cover email as you send the application, right?
Exactly. Sneaky.
Yes. Yeah, I definitely have sent, you know, a variety of sneaky cover emails over time, even if they didn't ask for a cover letter, right? They do help. I think a bit of, you know, kind of narrative can help. So yeah, so Emma is asking a good question here so if we're looking at kind of the right talent for that role, right, part of that is also being transparent, like we've been talking about, and also, you know, those salaries are being raised and things. And so how often do you see on Art Frankly organizations actually putting in the salary information into the job posting?
Not as often as I'd like them to, but that's the art world stuck in its way. Salary transparency is a work in progress. I think because of this competitive hiring landscape, I've seen it be included more frequently now, which is a good thing. But it's also complicated because, you know, a lot of the time salary is commensurate with experience. I hate that phrase, but it rings true in our industry, right? Someone that maybe has 2 or 3 or 5 years of work experience that is directly relatable or comparable to the employment opportunity probably should be paid more than the person who has 1 to 2 years. So in that sense, that does protect people that would apply who, or it courts people who maybe wouldn't have applied if the salary expectation was lower than what they're currently making or what they had previously made. So as much as like that term on a job description, I understand why it's there. And I do think that it is needed in certain situations.
Right. Yeah, if there's sort of like a wide variety of experience levels that could be applying to the same position. Yeah. But although I do notice sometimes they'll do like a range or something, right? Companies will put a range.
And the range is, I think, is okay. And you know, to Emma's question, like I do think for these more junior roles, it is being posted more, right? Like for instance, a gallery assistant front desk. It's probably someone that's right out of school or has, you know, a few internships or 1 to 2 years experience applying for those jobs. And then you don't need to put a range as much. It's pretty clear it's $5,000 per year. Okay, great. Then let's put that on and see what happens. But, you know, the art world, it's still resistant to transparency, and all these good efforts are happening, but they're still a little reluctant. Some clients do not want to make known how much they pay their staff. So
yeah, I mean, I guess for me, salary transparency also as a manager is really important, because I think it's something that also shows kind of how you value your team. So, you know, if you're posting a job that's very similar to many other jobs and your salary is like 30% less than theirs, you know, there can be a question mark in the candidates' minds. And if they have to go through that entire process to learn that information, I think that sometimes that can be a lose on both ends, right? Because then you have this candidate who you'd really like to hire and they go for another job just because of like the salary point, right? But you've already had to go through that process instead of someone, you know, sometimes I think what I see more and more, particularly with younger millennials and generation Z, is that they will actually email and say, I would love to have this job. The salary point is too low. Would you consider X, right? They're pretty vocal about those things. Or I've seen another posting at an equitable gallery that's offering X. Would you be willing to go closer to this? Because I would like to work with you, you know? And so I think that kind of conversation will also allow you to have better candidates, even if the salary you're putting doesn't end up being the right one for the market at that, you know, first time. Yeah.
exactly.
All right. Well, one more question, and then we'll get into our Q&A. So, you know, I was looking, and the average turnover in the art world is about 16 months, which is like 30% higher than other industries. So can you just talk a little bit about, you know, once employers have hired candidates, how can they retain them for a longer period?
I'm so happy that you brought that up. It's so dismal at figure. It's so infuriating too, because it does not need to be that low. And I always stress to my clients, especially those that I work with on the private recruiting, is you have to offer places of growth. You have to nurture your employees. This goes also to salary transparency. Pay them what they should be paid. They'll stay longer, you know, reward good work. If your employee is doing great and they've been with you for a year, give them a bump. give them a salary raise at the end of the year. If you can't do a salary raise, then make sure that you're providing a bonus. If their good work is really that good, I'm sure it's affecting, the company's bottom line again, so that the employee should be rewarded for that. I think the companies that do that have a higher retention rate. It just is what it is, right? And it's not only increases in salary, increases in title. It's I hate when I've met people that are still gallery assistants after 8 years. They shouldn't be gallery assistants, they should have a promotion with the title as well. So I think they exist, and I think there's more of a push. And again, this kind of, you're saying that younger generations are more vocal about what they need financially. There's more openness about which employers are offering that and which aren't. I mean, I think probably everyone in this group knows about that Instagram account that came out, Cancel Art Galleries, which was very it was very real. It was very, very real. And I think that kind of calling out is now making a lot of these employers who maybe didn't provide those positive workplace environments to think again. And that is very important that is happening, because at the end of the day, it's going to make their business more efficient if they don't have this insanely high turnover rate. It's exhausting to hire people, right? It's time consuming. It's difficult now to find those people. So you want to retain them. And it's like that saying, that it's very old fashioned to say, but like happy life, happy wife, or something along that. I always screw these things up. But if your staff is happy, then you're going to be happy. Your business is going to flourish. So I think it's kind of like having all those pieces fit together that are finally making sense.
No, definitely.
Parties.
Yeah. And beyond that too, I mean, if you, obviously this is not necessarily instead of salaries, but to add on to that, especially if you are like an organization that's a little smaller or kind of has the less funds to do as regular salary bumps as like a large one, you can also, I mean, I think a lot of art organizations haven't yet really gone into that world of incorporating kind of like employee enrichment programs and things. So, whether that's like additional training or courses that they can be taking, or like giving them more holiday, for example, as a bonus instead of, necessarily like a cash payment, or, all of these kind of different avenues of improving their, kind of team's well-being. That's not, only related to salary, although that is obviously a part of it.
Definitely. A lot of ways and and there's a lot of things that can be done by to foster those places of work. So
yeah, and especially for example, if your institution stands out in the amount of holiday you give from the beginning, like that's, I think, something that can be important, especially if you're looking in the US where the average is like 10 days a year. So yeah. And
exactly, like even if you can't give that financial increase, to your point, ask your staff what is needed, right? Like a lot of the times I've seen people that work in a role be thwarted by their ideas because they haven't been asked, or the place of work is not kind of open to hearing these things. And I think that's a mistake, because generations have ideas, and especially when it comes to technology or different platforms, or those are things that should be allowed to be vocalized and will probably help the company. So
yeah, definitely. Yeah. And I think also, I mean, if you think about those things, obviously some of them are monetary investment, like you think about software platforms, but sometimes it can be the difference of, like 100 a month, and then you have this additional tool that saves your team time and stress. So, sometimes kind of just, looking at what your team is asking for is definitely important. So I'm just going to see if anybody has any questions in the audience. You guys have been quiet today, so please pop it into the chat, pop it into the Q&A. Do you have any questions about hiring or searching for positions on either side, right? If you're a candidate or if you're an organization. Do you have any questions about Art Frankly? Anything and everything that you would like to ask Carlina, if you have any questions, or we've covered everything. Maybe we've covered everything you could potentially talk about. Who knows? We'll see. Anyone have any questions or comments? Honestly, I think we've been very comprehensive today, Carlina, so we may, I don't know how many questions we're going to get.
Wrapping up the year on a positive note.
Yeah, no, it's great. Okay, well, I'll give you guys another moment, and then otherwise, I think we might wrap up. Okay, so I guess that's it. You've answered all of the questions with your, immense amount of knowledge.
Oh boy.
So we really appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you, Mackenzie, for having me. And if anybody thinks of a question that they want to ask, feel free to share my email address as well. So.
Okay, great. And the recording will be out tomorrow. We'll send that out to everybody. Feel free to share it around. You want to cheekily send it to your hiring manager, go ahead. I'm sure it will be helpful for them too, just to kind of give another perspective on things from the recruiter side. And yeah, I hope everyone has a wonderful holiday, and we will see you in 2022.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.